Welcome in. It's week 9 on the Footballguys DFS Show. We have Devin Knotts back this week. Unfortunately, John Lee was not able to join us, but we're recording late night, so bear with us. We're going to go through the entire slate here on week 9, primarily on DraftKings, looking at your cash games, your GPP plays. We'll do some stacks, we'll do some discounts, but again, we're joined with Devin Knotts. We've got Phil in here. Devin, do you have any wisdom to impart to the people before we get rolling?
Wisdom probably ended like 3 hours ago. We're recording this at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that means we're probably going to get a little bit silly tonight. So Jeff promised us a costume, and we were expecting. He said he was a Care Bear, and we were expecting like a full furry suit. Instead, we got a sweatshirt. That's my wisdom for today.
Grumpy Bear. Trying my best. All right, let's dive in. Phil, what are you looking at this week for your games of the week?
Looking at a lot of shootouts this week, Jeff, or at least a lot of potential shootouts. Last week we didn't have enough good games, and this week it feels like we have too many. There are Colts at Steelers at 50.5, Colts -3 on the road. We've got two more games with totals over 50, Bears at Bengals, Bears short road favorites in Cincinnati. Chiefs at Bills is probably the one that everybody's got circled to watch. That'll be the national game, I'm sure. And then there's also one game that looks like it's attracting a tremendous amount of ownership is 49ers at Giants. Total there is 48.5, but several pieces of that game appear to be mispriced. So expecting to see a lot of ownership concentrate around that one. So yeah, it's not going to be easy. If it were, everyone would be winning $1 million, and we wouldn't have to do a show, and DraftKings wouldn't have a great business model. But we're going to talk about some ways to create lineups that kind of spread our exposure around these games, stack inside of them in different ways, and see if we could come up with some winning lineups for the people, or some winning strategies anyway.
Devin, do you have any other games that you're watching? Any other team sides that you want to play?
Nope.
All right, then. Well, before we go into more, just please take a minute to like, subscribe, do all those fun things to help us grow on YouTube. We appreciate all of you, and we love being here to make content, so that helps us be able to do that job. So let's look here at quarterbacks for cash game plays. Are we going to go with a Michigan Wolverine at quarterback here for a cash game play, Devin, or you got a different direction that you're looking at cash game play?
Yeah, I'm not doing that. I think the answer to me is really about it's one of two players, and it's either Jackson Dart or Caleb Williams. And Dart is 5,200. I think that's what Phil was referencing when he said some players are mispriced this week in that game. And San Francisco's defense, like they just allowed 318 yards and 2 touchdowns to CJ Stroud last week. They've allowed 389 and 3 to Matthew Stafford. But they have been hit or miss, and I don't know. I still don't fully trust Jackson Dart. Like you're relying on his rushing upside a little bit. So he had the one really good game against Philadelphia. He has run for a touchdown in each of his last, or I guess 4 of his 5 games. So with Scatabo out, that certainly helps him. I think the answer is Dart, but if you can get up to Caleb Williams, I think I would rather have Caleb. I think he and the Bears have a big performance this week against Cincinnati. It's kind of a must-win game for really both teams, but certainly Chicago if they want to keep pace in the NFC North.
Different direction, Phil. You're going the same way.
I don't have a huge problem with Caleb Williams, but it was Jackson Dart for me too. He's just blatantly too cheap. Like I'm not sure how his price came down $300 after another solid fantasy day and a division rematch against the tough Philly defense. But his worst game in 5 as a starter was 18.6 DraftKings points. That was back in week 5. So that kind of means he's never been below 3.5x multiple of his current salary. Seems like a pretty good starting point for a cash
Yeah,
game
it's just,
quarterback. I think that rushing floor keeps him in play there at 5,200.
I mean, if he rushes for a touchdown, he's guaranteed to hit cash game value. The question is, like, is this at some point, does this, I don't ever factor, and maybe that's on me because I'm having like the worst year of my life when it comes to fantasy, but I don't really ever factor in rushing touchdowns for quarterbacks because I have them all at under 50%. Maybe Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen when they're like really, but I don't normally pay up in cash to that level. So I don't know. Maybe Jackson Dart's going to run for 10 touchdowns this year, but maybe he's not. And I look at my flaw, and fully admit it's a flaw, is which quarterback has 300 plus yard upside. And it's probably dating myself back to when Eli Manning was a solid cash game play, even though he was a terrible real life quarterback, because he would throw for 310 yards and 2 touchdowns and you get the 3-point bonus and you'd be happy. But
So
yeah.
on that note, if we took salaries completely out of the equation, and that's how we were looking at this thing through the lens of who's the most likely quarterback to have a big passing game, who would it be?
Salary's completely out of the equation.
Yeah, let's just take it out of there. Who's going to have the best passing day on this slate?
Can Tennessee keep it close?
I doubt it.
Okay, then we're not taking Justin Herbert. I think Caleb Williams would be up there. I think certainly like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes would be popular choices, but I think it's one of those three.
So that was my thought, is that we might end up with a lot of value on this slate depending on how the injury report shakes out tomorrow. And if that happens, I do see a path to get up to Patrick Mahomes, who it sounds like was going to be Jeff's pick and would also be my pick, just by virtue of he's been the best quarterback this season. I think he's leading all quarterbacks in DraftKings scoring by like a 12% margin over the next closest player. Kansas City, I think, is going to score a lot of points in that one, and they can't run the ball, so it's no secret where those fantasy numbers are going to flow through for that Chiefs offense. So I kind of had it down to 2 players too, and it was Dart at the low end and Mahomes at the high end. But I'm not sure, Jeff, I know you like Mahomes, but did you have a different angle as to why?
Well, I think he just knows Sean McVay's defense, owns Sean McVay's defense, and not McVay, Sean McDermott's defense. And coming into there, it's every single time against the Bills, Patrick Mahomes does his thing. You mentioned they can't run the ball. They've got Rashee Rice back. Really, Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy are extensions of their run game, the way that they use them so often in the past game. So it's just the way that they attack, and a defense that they have attacked very, very well traditionally. Plus an offense on the Bills side that can continue to push him. As we're watching the end of this Baltimore-Miami Dolphins game, where really the entire second half, Baltimore was not pushed at all to try to do too much offensively. We're running into a lot of those games, it seems like, across the league, where we're just getting the opponent is not holding up their end of the bargain, and we're getting dead games by halftime.
The 1 p.m. slate game has been non-competitive this year.
I think last week it was something like I think the Jets-Bengals game was the only game that wasn't decided by, I think, 2 scores or 10 points or something to that effect.
It's brutal. And every time I look over and see this Baltimore-Miami game, it just pisses me off even more about how much I hate Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, he did it to me last week too.
I was eliminated in my work chop league. I was
dirty.
The leading scorer weekly by about 10 to 15 points per game, and I was eliminated because of John Robinson against Miami.
In my last 2 weeks in Kraken FanDuel, 2 plays have killed me. CeeDee Lamb's long touchdown, Saquon Barkley's long touchdown. You take those 2 plays out, they're winning weeks. Instead, they're losing weeks. The joys of fantasy football.
Very much true. And so part of the reason why I think this week it might be important to have that $500 difference when you're talking about Jackson Dart and Caleb Williams, we just have a loaded slate when it comes to, I think when you look at the top, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, you mentioned Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, then Jamar Chase, and then Puka Nacua as well. And I don't know that we've had a slate for a while that have had those are kind of the 6 best players in fantasy football right now, and they're all in the same slate.
You forgot Rico Dowdle.
Rico Dowdle's in the wrong side of a timeshare right now, unfortunately. So, is that where you're going in cash games right now, Devin? Are you running back or Rico Dowdle?
I mean, I'd love to play. If Rico Dowdle was named the starter, I would play Rico Dowdle. He's been too good. I mean, but I don't know what Carolina's doing. I think the key starting point at running back this week is the injury to DeAndre Swift. And he did not practice on Thursday with a groin injury. And if he doesn't play, Kyle Monangai needs to be 106% rostered. You look at what running backs have done to Cincinnati over this season. Breece Hall and Isaiah Davis combined for 198 and 2 touchdowns. Jalen Warren had 127 yards. J.K. Dobbins had over 100 yards. Jordan Mason had over 100 yards. Like, this is just a bad defense. And to get Monangai at 40, what is he? 46. Like, 46, yeah. It's a no-brainer price if Swift were to miss. I'm not touching Christian McCaffrey. Last week's performance was the worst performance that he's had in terms of rushing the ball since 2018. And that 2018 game was week 17, in which he played one series and still had 20 yards on that series. He only had 25 yards last week. He's averaging 3.5 yards a carry. Like, there's just no explosiveness. And certainly the passing upside helps, but I don't know. I don't see a world where I would rather play McCaffrey than a Jonathan Taylor. The upside for Taylor, and I know he's $9,800, which is insane, but the upside is just higher for him. There's some interesting plays here because Bijan Robinson's going up against New England. New England probably has the best run defense in football right now, which means that because he didn't have a good game last week, he's going to have, he's matchup proof, but I'm not touching him. Kamani Vidal at 6,300 is the guy that I'm targeting. The guy does not have a big name, but against Miami and against Minnesota in 2 of his last 3 games, he has 22 or stopped 100 yards in each of those games. Has 25 DraftKings points and 22 DraftKings points at 6,200 or 6,300. It just seems a little bit too cheap in a game where if the Chargers can't name their score, there's a problem, right? So Jonathan Taylor on 12 carries had 153 yards against this defense last week. So I think it's Monangai, Taylor, and Vidal at least is how I'm starting. And then trying to figure out RB3 if Monangai were to, or I guess if DeAndre Swift were to play.
So question there, if DeAndre Swift does play at 6,100, are you looking to him in cash with the way that the last couple of weeks that's kind of devolved into like a 55-45 kind of split between him and Monangai? I know that we want to play Cincinnati running backs. So that would be my question. With the injury, assuming Swift is the lead back if he plays, do you look to play him in cash or do you look elsewhere?
I think I'm looking elsewhere. Well, the price is what? 6,100. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard price. I'm probably not playing him at that price. I think that it's too risky in the sense that especially with like soft tissue muscles. What happens if he pulls something early on? Like I don't know that I want. If he has a full practice on Friday, it's extremely unlikely. It's not going to happen. Worst case, he'll be limited. If he had a full practice, I would play him.
Yeah, I
But
think
otherwise, I'd go down to like Jalen Warren at 55. I think he's against Indy. He's in a much better spot than banged up Swift that can't practice on Wednesday or Thursday.
All right.
Do you have arguments,
So,
Phil?
yeah. So I guess I kind of have an opposite stance on Christian McCaffrey. So I put this together as if um, DeAndre Swift is going to start just because we don't know yet. So that extra $1,000 to get up to Jonathan Taylor really matters in that case. And I think you have to look at last week's matchup for McCaffrey against Houston, who's really tough to run on. And then you look at this week's matchup against the Giants, who allow the highest EPA per rush play in the NFL. They're bottom 7 in fantasy points allowed to running backs. We saw the wheels come all the way off last week on that Saquon Barkley run, and then everything that Tank Bigsby did after he came in for Barkley. They combined for over 250 rushing yards as a team. Plus, McCaffrey numbers are just silly. I don't know. Does anybody know off the top of their head? I know I've seen the stat floating around social media where he would rank among wide receivers if he didn't have a single rushing statistic to his name. I think it's somewhere inside the top 10, right? So it's just kind of crazy how much he matters as a receiver and how much he's the engine of that offense. I think he's worth every bit of the 8,800. He might even be a better play outright than Jonathan Taylor because of how touchdown dependent Taylor is. And we talked about it a little bit last week with John, and boy, did variance not swing our way. He had 3 touchdowns again.
Well, he was minus 425 to score a touchdown, which is the highest that I've ever seen in the 10 years that I've been tracking it. He's minus 325 again this week.
Listen, he deserves the $98 salary, but
you're better off just
I think
finding a site that allows you that he won't score instead of fading him in GPPs.
Probably correct there. So I did McCaffrey for 8,800 and then Tyrone Tracy for 5,100. I don't love Tracy as a play here for any reason other than he's 5,100, which usually means maybe that's not such a great play. But I do think from a projected touches per dollar standpoint, he's probably going to see 70% of the snaps. That's where he was at in week 1 before he got hurt and the door opened for Scattaboo. So I think we could count on that. We have him projected on the site for 15 carries and 3 catches. I think that sounds about right on the median. So it's hard to do much better than that for 5,100. I do think that Monangai would be a much better play at 4,600 than Tracy would at 5,100. I guess there's also a little bit of correlation with Dart. I just don't know how much New York Giants correlation I really want in this cash game lineup. And there's even another play when we get to wide receivers, and all of a sudden you get to the point where you're putting together a cash game lineup, and it's like a Giants San Francisco game stack because you've got McCaffrey. There's some other cheap pieces that you could think about too on the San Francisco side. So it gets to be a lot where if that game duds out, you're definitely not winning money. So I don't mind getting up to Warren from Tracy either. And I know that Devin just mentioned that. Shout out also to Moral Tremblay, one of our staff projectors, one of the sharpest dudes I've ever had the pleasure of meeting in person. He kind of got, just to lift the curtain a little bit behind the scenes, he got called out earlier this week for being a little high on Jalen Warren. In a staff chat, he defended the take, and he really sold me because what he was saying is that like since Warren got healthy, he's really taken over the backfield. So in the 2 games that he's been back from injury, he's got 29 carries to get Kenneth Gainwell's 8. He's got twice as many targets. Besides that, Warren's been really efficient this season, 4.5 yards per rush, 9 yards per target, 94 scrimmage yards per game. And he's probably due some touchdown regression because he's got a strong red zone role and he's only scored once. So we've got this high scoring game. We've got the Steelers at home. We've got a back who's dominating the carries. So, yeah, usually a pretty good idea to trail folks that are smarter than you. And I know that Morrill's smarter than me. So I'm riding with our friend Mr. Tremblay this week there on Jalen Moore. And so, yeah, a bunch of names to choose from, and then the only other one that I'd call out too is we've got Ramondre Stevenson out of practice 2 straight days, and I think the Patriots signed like 3 running backs to their practice squad this week, so that's a pretty good tell that maybe that toe injury is pretty serious. They were also linked to running backs at the trade deadline. There's a lot of smoke. For this week, I don't think they would have a choice but to give Travion Henderson a sizable workload, even though that probably means we're going to see Tyrell Jennings like take on the Ramondre Stevenson role and put the banana in the tailpipe on us. But I think they'd have to play Travion Henderson, and that's exciting, especially against Atlanta, who does have a run funnel defense. So there's a scenario, like I said, where we do have a lot of value, and then that opens up high price quarterback, and it might change the plan too a little bit at wide receiver, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Pray for Drake May's health if Henderson has to start the entire game.
I think I don't know that it would be a cash game play, but Kareem Hunt at 4,700, I think it's kind of interesting if you really wanted that cost savings. I mean, you're kind of in the ballpark there. Monangai potential. If you really build your roster around Monangai with Swift out and you end up needing a pivot, I mean, Hunt might be kind of that same price level there. Let's look at wide receivers now. And Phil, what direction, you've already dropped hints a little bit about liking that San Francisco Giants game, but what direction are you looking at for your wide receivers here?
Yeah, I think you have to start with Jamar Chase. I guess it gets a little bit more fragile with Joe Flacco nursing a sprained AC joint, but apparently he was at practice today, and I think it was Chase who said that he looked like Joe Flacco usually looks. So that seems like a good sign. But I'm not breaking news here. The guy's averaging 18 targets per game in Flacco's 3 starts. Not to mention Cincinnati's also playing a defense that allows quarterbacks a lot of time to throw. So I think I would risk whatever Flacco injury risk there is and put Chase in ahead of Puka Nakua as long as Flacco is going to be active. So from there is where it gets a little interesting. Wandale Robinson, I know, like I said, I've got this game like stacked.
You can't play 3 Giants in a cash game lineup.
I know. So I'd probably end up playing Warren over Tyrone Tracy in this case. And I'm really hoping for Monangai. But Wandale Robinson is objectively a good play. I'm struggling with it a little bit outside of the stacked up game environment thing. Just because Darius Slayton returned to the lineup last week and he did out target Robinson. Robinson had a bad game, but he was also running his slot routes against Cooper DeJean. This week, he is lining up in the slot against San Francisco. They allow 15 yards more than expected to slot wide receivers. That was one that we targeted last week, and it paid off. I think we could do it again. And then life comes at you fast, but Shimere DK, I was asking Jeff how to pronounce the guy's name last week. I still don't know if I have it right. But now all of a sudden he's in my cash game lineup. Listen, we were right to take a chance on him last week after he filled the void for Calvin Ridley with 4 for 70 and a touchdown against New England. He did follow it up with more snaps, more targets, more catches last week against Indy. He had 8 for 93. And at the end of the day, I think it shapes up that we'll need someone in his price range. And there are other guys sub 4K who maybe could get there, but I don't think they have the same probability of doing it that DK does. So he's there's really nothing to hang our hats on about the Chargers matchup except for Cincinnati's going to be, Tennessee is going to be trailing by a lot of points as usual, and that should sustain the targets for DK, who looks like the best bet of the bunch. So there are some other names to consider, but those are my three. I'll throw it over to Devin to see who he likes, and then we could circle back if there's anyone that hasn't been mentioned.
I'm going to take the low hang. No, I'm not going to take the low hanging fruit of making a joke and mispronouncing Dyke's name. Area to watch is Chicago's receivers. Luther Burton is going to miss with a concussion. DJ Moore looks like he might miss with a hip or groin injury. He didn't practice on Wednesday, and he was limited on Thursday. Same thing with Rome Odunze, and then Olamide Zaccheaus also is in that, did not practice Wednesday, limited on Thursday. I think of those receivers, Zaccheaus is probably the guy that I'm most intrigued by if one of Odunze or Moore were to miss. 3,300 is just a ridiculous price. I think that this game is going to be quite the shootout. I agree with you on Jamar Chase as essentially a must play. If Joe Flacco's active, like, I'm not concerned about this in the slightest as far as in sprained AC. Like, it just doesn't matter. And if he has arm issues, then he still has more arm strength by about 600% than Dylan Gabriel, even if he had a separated shoulder. So I'm really not too concerned about it. What are we doing with Travis Hunter? Anything?
So I saw before we came on that he actually was downgraded to limited today in practice. He picked up a knee injury in practice today, so that might put a damper on things depending on what that looks like tomorrow.
Yeah.
He struck me as someone who maybe was going to catch a little bit too much steam because of those quotes that came out from I think it was a Jaguars beat. It wasn't even the coaching staff necessarily, right? That suggested that he's going to get the wide receiver one treatment. So I think that got people really excited. And I was keeping an eye on his projected ownership. And I think that was one that heading into the weekend, had we not gotten this injury, it could have risen to the point where people might play him in cash. To me, I don't know. I think that when we last saw him,
I think if Brian Thomas misses, he's interesting.
oh, definitely. Yeah. Otherwise, I think the 14 targets that he had the last time we saw him were largely due to that game script and how badly Jacksonville was getting whooped in London by LA.
Yeah. Okay. What else do I have? Michael Pittman just keeps producing, and he goes under the radar almost every week. But, you look at his last 5 of his last 6 games, he has 15 or more DraftKings points with 20 or more in each of his last 2. He's been touchdown dependent, so he scored five touchdowns in his last 6 games. But I don't know. I'm less concerned about the touchdown dependency just because he's the guy in that offense at 6'4". Big body. Daniel Jones continues to ball out, but I think that he's at least intriguing. He's a player who probably should be in like the mid to high 6s, but like there's no reason Pittman should be $200 less than Chris Olave, in my opinion. I think the upside of Pittman is just higher.
I'll buy that. What do you guys think about Rashee Rice at 7,600? Because I think if all this value opens up, there's a path where you could fit Chase and Rice together. Even if you play Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, if you go with 2 cheap receivers, along with 2 cheap running backs, it's possible to squeeze it in. I mean, he's back. He's awesome. The role is awesome. He probably should have had even more touchdowns last week than he did. Um, he's priced well behind Nakua and Chase, which I think is justified. Um, but I don't know, something about that. I just feel like Jeff said, he's like an extension of the running. He's almost what Jamar Chase is in Cincinnati. Kind of an extension of the running game on these get the ball out quick type of plays, and the red zone role is incredible. So if I can, I might move all the way up for him.
Definitely doesn't feel like Amon-Ra St. Brown. You can talk about Nakua and Chase being on a different tier, but it doesn't feel like Amon-Ra St. Brown should be 700 more than Rashee Rice. I think Rashee Rice is a really good call out there. I think he's a great value sitting here at 7,600 still. They might not need to. Well, they're going to need to throw it probably to score some points, but Ladd McConkey at 6,000 against Tennessee, it's interesting. Been a top 5 wide receiver 5 over the last 4 games, still sitting at that 6,000 price tag. Feels a little bit low relative to what you could get in that matchup. Khalil Shakir at 5,300. We talked about the Chiefs side of that game. I think Buffalo's got to come back with something, and it's right now it feels like it would be Shakir outside of James Cook if James Cook is not rolling or if they fall behind, whatever it might be that opens that up. You would think Shakir would be seeing some volume against that difficult Chiefs defense, that matchup. But let's look at tight ends here. And Devin, what are you looking at for tight ends in your cash game plays?
It's ugly. It's really ugly this week. You certainly don't have a lot of salary to go up. And maybe you do once this thing all settles. And if you do have the salary to go up, do you just force Brock Bowers at 5,000? And the thinking there is like, why are the Raiders bringing him back unless he's like close to 100%? They have nothing to play for. And they've sort of slow rolled this thing.
Not a well-run football team.
What?
Because they're not a well-run football team.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess there's that. But I don't know. I think if there was a case to pay for $5,000 if you can afford it, I don't know that you can, but he would be the guy over like a 4,600 Travis Kelce or a 4,300 Sam Laporta. I think you just have more upside on a team that desperately needs that that receiver because they've been one of the worst offenses in the NFL, which is funny because Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles have both had horrendous seasons after leaving Ohio State. 2,900 Gunnar Helm. Anybody? Like if you wanted to go cheap,
well,
we don't have him projected, so I would assume so. But
if Okonkwo's out, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean, I can check, but you can talk through, and I'll come back with Okonkwo's status.
Because I don't know that he was. I don't know that I saw him on the injury report. I mean,
he missed practice on Thursday.
Okay,
he did. Okay, yeah, that definitely gives a viable option at the low end. I was going to say there's also Colston Loveland down at 3,300 if Cole Kmet can't get back, but I think he was practicing limited the last that I saw there. I agree on the $5,000 range. I think that I mean, there's a lot of options in that range. It really just depends, I guess, on what you do at defense, exactly what you do at running back, because, like I said, the 400 here and the 300 there kind of matter. The way my lineup worked out, I put George Kittle at 4,800 just to add to the Giants San Fran game stack that I had. But I think from a point per dollar standpoint, he's probably right there with Brock Bowers. I'd feel a little bit better if Brock Purdy were playing, but I think he'll be out again this week too.
A little advice for those that are listening. If if you're going to play 5 players on the same lineup in a cash game and you're in a state where it's legal to sports bet, just take the over. Because, like, the only way you're winning in cash is if that game goes over, and you're still not guaranteed to win. So take an alternate line, get some, like, actual value for your money. And I guess that transitions us into GPPs pretty well, but, like, 5 players in the same game is too many unless it's a Thanksgiving slate. And then there's 3 games on the slate.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. But I will say, individually, they all project well as good plays that could go into a cash game lineup. But it's not something that I would. This is not something that I would actually play, and it's not something that I think I would have to play based on what's going to shake out of the news wire after tomorrow's practice. But
I would be surprised if DeAndre Swift plays, but what do I know?
yeah,
If Dalton Schultz doesn't play, Harrison Bryant at 2,500 is like the only other tight end that has played at all. And at 2,500, I mean, you're not needing a lot to get value on that 2,500 price tag. If you're looking for somewhere that you can save some money, that's assuming that Dalton Schultz is out of the game. Let's look at Devin. You already introduced the topic. Let's look at our GPP plays. Open up the board. Let's run through here. Quarterbacks. Devin, GPP quarterbacks.
Yeah, just looking at ownership projections, roster percentages, whatever you want to call them. I think, around 5%. We already sort of mentioned him, but Joe Flacco in this game. I mean, Caleb Williams is going to be popular. I think Caleb Williams and Jackson Dart are going to be the 2 most popular, followed quickly behind Mahomes. So those are really the big 3. I anticipate all 3 of them will be somewhere in the 12 to 17% range. So it leaves a lot of options on the bottom. And I think Flacco at 56 is certainly a really good option. This is a team that has struggled mightily and has largely just abandoned running the ball. I know Chase Brown has looked a little bit better recently, but he's still only getting like 10 or 11 carries per game. Josh Allen is projected to be about 3% rostered as of Thursday night, which I know Josh Allen has not been great this season compared to, his Superman type seasons that he's had. But these games against the Chiefs bring out, we saw against the Ravens in week 1, they bring out the best of Josh Allen. And I think you could see at 3% rostered, it's just too low considering Mahomes is going to be 5 times that. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then the last name I'll throw out there is Justin Herbert. If Tennessee can keep it close, like both Herbert and Kamani Vidal and or Lad McConkey or Keenan Allen or one of these receivers, will have a big game. And Tennessee's defense is abysmal. Their offense isn't any good either, but if you can just get enough out of Tennessee to keep it close, I think there's a world where Justin Herbert at like 3 to 4% is a GPP winner.
If you're playing Tennessee to keep it close, why don't you just go with the 4,500 for Cam Ward instead of Herbert there?
When I'm saying keep it close, it's like, hey, it's 14-14 at half, and then it's 35-14 at the end of the game. It's not necessarily that I believe Tennessee can win the game. It's more just like, can there be a kick return for a touchdown? Can there be a defensive I'm scratching and clawing at ways that Tennessee can score so that Justin Herbert is forced to throw the ball against this defense.
Okay.
You might have just made a stronger case for Kamani Vidal, who you liked a lot too.
I love Kamani Vidal
because Yeah, that's definitely the path of least resistance in that game. I'll co-sign Josh Allen. I guess it's a little bit narrative driven, but it's also based in reality that this is the team that's knocked him out of the playoffs 4 times in his career. I'd have to think that he knows going in that if they're going to win the game, it's going to be on his back, and they're kind of going to ask him, or he's going to voluntarily put on that Superman cape. Um, it's just kind of what we've seen from the Bills this season. They're not going to pour it on teams if they don't have to. They're going to look to run first, and they're going to look to salt away a win. But I think this is going to be a competitive back and forth game. So for all the reasons that Devin said from an ownership standpoint, to like Allen, I'm totally on board with that. I'm going to go a little bit more off the board with some plain old crappy quarterbacks. Geno Smith at 4,600 on the complete other side of the spectrum from guys like Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. There's probably not a player that's needed the bye week more than Geno Smith. He hasn't cleared 12.8 DraftKings points since week 3, hasn't reached double digits on DraftKings since week 4. It's week 9 right now, by the way.
It's
But
3:45.
that said, he's got.
We're talking about Geno Smith.
Well,
Some of
that's
us want to go to bed.
Look, he's got Brock Bowers back, right? Bowers is only 5K. That's 1,500 less than his week 1 price. So now you've got this cheap stack. The last time we saw the Jacksonville defense, Matthew Stafford carved them up for 5 touchdowns on 21 completions. On the season, Jacksonville has allowed the 4th most DraftKings points, 2 quarterbacks. They seem to encourage these game scripts where pass happy games ensue on both sides of the ball. I like it. I like the price of the stack. I like the uniqueness. I think you could do kind of whatever you want around a Smith, Bowers, Trey Tucker stack. And there's some good chalk out there this week. So I think that's one way to get unique. And then in a game that nobody's really on, by the way. So I like stacking up the whole game, which I'll get to when we get to running backs too. But staying with quarterbacks that nobody really wants to play, Aaron Rodgers at 5,800. Pittsburgh's defense is just too old and too slow to hang with this Colts offense. And then the Colts defense is allowing the 4th most passing yards per game, 8th highest yards after the catch over expected. So that's good for the receivers, Metcalf, and maybe even Jalen Warren. You could play alongside Rodgers if you wanted to correlate. But I think Pittsburgh is going to keep it close at home. That's what the spread implies. And if they're going to do it, it's got to be because they scored a bunch of points, because the defense is going to get roasted by that Colts offense, I think. And then Drake May, 6,500, just because, like I said last week, you need a piece of Drake May every week. He's just playing too well, and he's never really that owned. Despite the fact that he's just one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football this year. I think we could say that safely at the halfway point. So the Falcons are way worse against the run than the pass, but I'm making sure that I put some Drake May in my portfolio each and every week.
Matthew Stafford at 6,300 coming off a 5-touchdown pass game against Jacksonville and then a bye. I wish that Spencer Rattler was playing on the other side for the Saints. I think just having the ability to maybe, like Devin talking about with the Titans, push them a little bit. Spencer Rattler was fun bad. He was Jameis Winston level bad quarterback where he was at least going to take some shots. I don't know that Tyler Shuck's going to take any shots outside of the shots that he takes from maybe holding on to the ball too long. We'll see.
They're going with
Daniel
the more
Jones,
experienced quarterback. They're going with the more experienced quarterback, Jeff.
Yes,
Tyler Shuck
they are
is older than Spencer Rattler.
They need to. They're turning the page to their future, and they're playing Tyler Shuck, and they're maybe looking at Devon Vele over Rashid Shaheed. That they're both older than the guys that they're replacing. So that's where the Saints are as an organization right now. Daniel Jones, 6,200, going up against Pittsburgh. We've seen Pittsburgh get absolutely slaughtered in the pass defense. I mean, that's one that it would be a direct pivot off of a high ownership play for Jonathan Taylor if you wanted to go there with Daniel Jones. Trevor Lawrence at 5,400, the game that Phil was talking about there with Jacksonville and the Raiders. I think that could be an interesting path into that. Trevor Lawrence has been a top 12 quarterback over the last couple of weeks. And then the super gross one, J.J. McCarthy, 4,900, going up against Detroit. Detroit should put it on Minnesota a little bit. There's some talent on the Vikings side, at least. It's gross. I don't know that you really want to do that, but let's look at running backs GPP plays.
I love how you said Trevor Lawrence, and then you followed that up with this one is the super gross one.
Yes, that's what happens when J.D. McCarthy is available. Trevor Lawrence is not the super gross one anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so running backs. Why is Kyron Williams going to be like 30% rostered against New Orleans? Is it just because people think New Orleans is bad?
Yeah,
I think so.
Like Kyron Williams hasn't been that good.
No.
He has one 20-point game this season.
If it's that bad that it's like Kyron Williams, then Blake Corum's going to play too, and they get there out of the passing game usually.
Yeah, he's a clear fade for me. I mean, if this 28%, 30% that I'm seeing is true, then that's the easiest fade we've had in quite some time. Kamani Vidal at 15% is like, I can't say it enough. He's the number one guy for me. I think it's interesting whether you pay up for McCaffrey or not. He's going to be about 30 to 35% rostered. He's going to be the highest rostered player. Probably should be because of his floor. But I talked a little bit about it. I don't know that he has the ceiling of a Taylor or even like a Bijan Robinson. I know the Giants are bad, and I know that their run defense is bad. But normally when you get embarrassed like they did, I have this theory that like teams game plan for that the next week. And maybe they're just so talent inept that they can't do it. But their defensive line is more than capable with Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau and Abdul Carter. Like they have one of the most talented defensive lines. It's just if you get past that defensive line, there's nobody else to tackle. So could we see a big week from McCaffrey? Yes, but like Philly was able to win the battle on the line of scrimmage, and San Francisco's offensive line is nowhere near the quality of Philadelphia's. So that would be the only hesitancy that I would have for McCaffrey. I think that Taylor, like I said, if you can afford Taylor at 98, I would certainly think about it. If Monangai starts, he will be probably the highest rostered player on this slate. And then the only other name that I had was Josh Jacobs. So Carolina had started off the year with really being one of the more impressive run defenses, to the point where last year they were the worst run defense that we've seen in a long time, not only just last year, but over the last several years. And they really have shown improvement up until last week. No running back had run for 75 yards since week one against this team, but James Cook ran for 216 and 2. So I do wonder if like the wheels are starting to fall off for Carolina. And if that's the case, then I want at least some Josh Jacobs this week.
I'm looking at Jahmyr Gibbs at 8,000, and I'm thinking that he'll probably max out around 10% rostered. But the Lions are off a bye. They're at home. They're favored by 8.5. They're playing against this shaky quarterback who might put Detroit's offense in great spots all night. And Gibbs, obviously one of the best running backs in the league. I think that is a good roster percentage for him in GPPs to overweight the field. GPPs is where I am getting ahead of this Rico Dowdle thing. So, like Carolina's head coach, Dave Canales, he spoke about Chuba Hubbard this week as if he was reading his eulogy. Like it was past tense. It sounded like Chuba Hubbard died. May God rest his soul. It sure sounds like they are moving to Rico Dowdle, that they acknowledge that he's exceptional and that Chuba Hubbard, they gave him a chance coming back from injury. They wanted to do the right thing by him, veteran deference, all that good stuff. But I want to be on Rico Dowdle before he gets to 20 plus touches and everybody projects him that way. I do wish he was a little bit cheaper. I do wish he wasn't playing in Green Bay. But if Dowdle is like 3% owned because he's projecting poorly and nobody wants to take the chance that Canales is going to go with him, just based on those sound bites, I think there's a greater than 3% chance that he might get 20 touches this week. And we've seen Rico Dowdle on 20 plus touches, and it's been really good for fantasy football. So definitely want to get ahead of that one. And then I think Travis Etienne is sneaky at 5,600. I had mentioned liking the Raiders Jaguars game for some scoring. And part of the reason I like Geno Smith is because I think that Jacksonville's offense could also look good coming out of the bye. Just because, they're integrating a new system. So having a bye week to get comfortable definitely helps them. I think that the coaches have probably been wearing them out after that sorry performance in London against the Rams. So I think they answered the call here by hanging a big number on Vegas. We mentioned Travis Hunter possibly going over-owned if his health checks out. So I think that ETN might be good leverage off of that. With more touches, better touchdown potential, and way less ownership.
Chase Brown, 5,900. He's been a top 10 running back the last 2 weeks. He's really seemed like the big beneficiary with Joe Flacco in the lineup. Then I think that you're looking at that matchup going up against the Bears. The Bears, they like to take chances on defense. Chase Brown, big play creator. I mean, he catches a seam. He can go out the other way. So I think that could be an interesting play that might be under the radar a little bit. I mean, Rashad Smith at 4,200 is probably going to be somewhat niche popular. I mean, that is a way that you can get into that Chiefs offense if you wanted to go that direction. Be remiss not to mention James Cook coming off a 216-yard game. I know that was against Carolina, and Kansas City is a much tougher defense, but we did see them in the playoffs. James Cook was looking pretty strong against this Chiefs defense in the playoffs. The Bills might potentially want to they probably do want to build their offensive game plan around James Cook on the ground to try to limit what Patrick Mahomes can do coming back the other direction. Let's take out wide receivers. Phil, what are going to be your wide receivers on your GPP plays?
Yeah, so you can't like Geno Smith without expecting Trey Tucker to catch a long one. So I'll be putting Tucker in some of those Geno stacks. We talked a good deal
Can I
already
ask you
about
about the
Michael
Geno stack real quick? Would
Sure.
Action Genti be a potential play there? Because we've seen him be utilized in the passing game. And so I think if you're making the argument of Geno Smith having some success, maybe Genti is the outlet that gets some of that going.
Yep. I think he's definitely in play, and I think that he projects as a pretty good leverage play this week in general, because I might be wrong about the passing game, but right about the scoring on the Vegas side. And it could go through Genti that way, or it could be correlated because, like you said, he's been involved as a pass catcher. Just sticking with the wide receivers, I won't talk too much about Pittman since we already covered him, but I think that he gets a bad rap as being like an all floor guy who can't win you a GPP because he has no ceiling. And maybe that's true to some degree because if he's going to be the reason you won a tournament, he probably needs to score 3 touchdowns, but he could still be a reason you win a tournament at 5,900 in this game against the Steelers, who give up about 30 yards per pass game over expected to outside receivers. So I think that puts Pittman in play for tournaments. I think that also puts Alec Pierce in play for tournaments. And then Drake London, assuming he's back this week. New England contains outside wide receivers about as well as Pittsburgh does, which is to say, not very well. That was part of the reason that John and I were both on Jerry Jeudy last week. That did not work out because of Dylan Gabriel. But we should be getting an injury discount on London's ownership. He's a target hog, double-digit targets in his last 3, over 110 receiving yards in 2 of his last 3. He'll get the favorable coverage, and I don't think he will top 15% owned. So we sort of like Pittman, except we know London could go for 35 plus in any given week. So that's where I'm at wide receiver.
If I let you guys talk about Geno Smith too much longer, I'm going to fall asleep. So I think I'll go quick. Christian Watson, 4,400. He looked really impressive in his first week back, which that timeline seems really accelerated. He was injured, I think, in week 18. I was at the game in Green Bay. But he had 4 for 85 last week against Pittsburgh, and going up against Carolina this week, I think he's one of, if not the most talented receiver on this team, but certainly has the opportunity. If you wanted to pivot off of DK, I think Io Manor, somebody has to catch the ball in Tennessee, and we've seen them both flip-flop, and they're both really good prices. So I don't want to talk about the high end any more than we already have. If you are concerned about Flacco's injury, maybe you do pivot to Puka Nacua, but I'm personally not, in the volume that Chase is getting is just too high.
I think talking about pivots, I mean, if everybody's going to be on Kyron Williams or Puka Nacua is going to be popular, Devontae Adams feels like a direct pivot there, coming off 3-touchdown game before the bye in a game that they should score some points. Rome Odunze, assuming he's active at 6,600 in that, again, another pivot off of Monangai if you wanted to go there with that passing offense getting going. Brian Thomas Jr. at 6,200 against the Raiders. If you can name 2 Raiders cornerbacks, then I will give you some candy out of my children's Halloween basket, because I don't think anybody's going to name 2 Raiders cornerbacks at this point in time. I think there's some interesting names as we look at Tuesday's trade deadline, where last week we saw Rashid Shaheed get 12 targets. I wonder if that wasn't a little bit of, let's see what Shaheed can do. Maybe Jacoby Myers is one of those names that might be banded about in the trade deadline. Maybe there's some showcasing that happens with some of these guys that are sitting in the trade market this week as teams want to show them off heading into that deadline on Tuesday. Jameson Williams at 4,800. I think it's we've seen Vikings be very good against outside receivers. Jameson Williams had comments basically saying, that he had a meeting with John Morton. They're trying to figure out ways to get him involved, to get him going. And that's one that can pay off at any time. And then Alec Pierce, we've seen him. He does get to pay off every single week, gets a big shot every week. 4,600, that potential play there. Tight ends. Anything else in your GPPs for tight ends?
I would just say Tucker Kraft at 5,700. 19 targets in his last 2 games combined, which has coincided with Josh Jacobs not being 100%, and they've scaled back the run game a little bit. So maybe that's a little bit correlated. Maybe it has something to do with the calf injury to Jacobs. Game scripts definitely played a part in the heavier volume too for Kraft. But it could just be LaFleur understands that getting Kraft the ball with a little bit of runway is the best thing for his offense, at least until Jacobs is back to 100%. Carolina, you'll remember, is a great matchup to target for tight ends. They've improved the last 2 weeks, but last week the Bills barely had to throw the ball, so that one doesn't really count. And the week before, Justin Fields couldn't throw the ball, so that one doesn't really count. So I'm not convinced that they have plugged the leak defending tight ends. Carolina has.
Oronde Gadsden, no one's going to play him at 5,300. And he has 17 or more DraftKings points in each of his last 3 games. Again, going back to someone on this Chargers team has to score.
Multiple people on this Chargers teams actually probably will score against the Titans. So you do have that going for you. Let's do our stacks of the week. And Devin, what is your stack of the week?
Let's go stack. let's go with. I wanted to do a Caleb Williams stack, but the problem is all of the players that are out for them. So that's kind of thrown me in a bit of a like mental pickle. Let's go Joe Flacco, Jamar Chase, and Kyle Monangai.
Phil, what do you have?
It's either going to be it's going to be the Colts Steelers game. Maybe it's a cop out, but I think you could stack it from either side. Whether you like Daniel Jones or Aaron Rodgers better, but let's say Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Warren, DK Metcalf. On the Steelers side, run it back with Jonathan Taylor, and do some variations around that where you get the Colts receivers into it too.
I'm going to go because it haunts my dreams every single time that I see these two teams on the field. Patrick Mahomes, Rashee Rice. It's just going to be the stack of the week. I have a feeling.
Put Kelsey in there too.
What's that?
Put Travis Kelsey in there too.
Throw Travis Kelsey in there for.
I'll
I'll throw Travis Kelsey in there for my daughter, and then I will throw Khalil Shakir coming back on the Bills side. So we'll do that. So we got Mahomes, Rice, Kelsey, and then Khalil Shakir. So what is your favorite discount play of the week, Phil?
Parker Washington, 3,700. And I had this written down before I knew about the Travis Hunter injury. He was up to 88% of the snaps, even with De'Ami Brown back in the lineup in the game before the bye. 10 targets in that one also, which, as I mentioned, the Jaguars' passing volume was a little bit inflated because of the ugly loss. But I don't know. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to come out looking a little bit better after the bye. I think that Parker Washington has a rapport with Lawrence that Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas do not. And Matt Waldman likes him. So what more do we need? Parker Washington.
What do you have, Devin?
Olamide Zacchaeus, 3,300 if DJ Moore misses.
Yeah, I'll do if Dalton Schultz is out, I'm going to go Harrison Bryant at 2,500 for a discount play. So I'll do that. That's all we got. Devin, why don't you send it out?
Yeah, bit of a sad week this week. Wanted to share thoughts and prayers to really two people. I think that certainly the family of Nick Mangold. Jeff, I don't know if you want to say anything. I know you're somewhat close to that family, but really just his time and my time didn't exactly overlap at Ohio State, but just the character of him. Such a good person, such a good person in the community. And then the other person that I will say, for those that are golf fans, Barstool Beef was 31 and passed away this past week. So I thoughts and prayers out to him. I've played golf with him a couple times. He's a really good dude as well. So just kind of a sad week that, you have a Buckeye legend, a future Hall of Famer, hopefully, but more importantly, just a down-to-earth, tremendous human in Nick Mangold passing away. So I just wanted to end the show that way.
Yeah. I mean, Nick is he was a family friend. My wife, his wife was in our wedding. My wife was in their wedding. They went to college together. They great relationship. He's hosted my family multiple times on vacations, and just incredibly generous, amazing human. 4 kids. It was really sudden. I know that there was the news about the kidney stuff had come out a couple weeks ago, and it was very unexpected. And like I said, 4 young kids, great wife, Jenny, just one of the most amazing people I've ever met. One of the most amazing couples I've ever met. High school sweethearts. I mean, just really heartbreaking situation there. So appreciate you.
Pride of Centerville, Ohio.